couple's dream of owning a beautiful home in Westfield, New Jersey turns into a nightmare when they start receiving threatening letters from an anonymous person known only as the Watcher. So welcome to Something Strange. Our story begins in June of 2014. Derek Broaddus and his wife Maria purchased their dream home in Westfield, New Jersey. Little did they know that this would be the beginning of a chilling and perplexing mystery. Derek Broaddus had just finished an evening of painting at his new home in Westfield, New Jersey when he went outside to check the mail. Derek and his wife Maria had closed on the 6-bedroom house at 657 Boulevard 3 days earlier and were doing some renovations before they moved in. So at this point there wasn't much in the mail except a few bills but a white card-shaped envelope. It was addressed in thick, clunky handwriting to, quote, the new owner, quote, and the typed note inside began pleasantly, and it stated as follows:
Dearest new neighbor at 657 Boulevard, allow me to welcome you to the neighborhood.
Now, for the Broadduses, buying the 657 Boulevard home had fulfilled a dream. Maria was raised in Westfield, and the house was a few blocks from her childhood home. Derek grew up working class in Maine, then moved his way up the ladder at an insurance company in Manhattan to become a senior vice president with a salary large enough to afford the $1.3 million home. And the Broadduses had bought the 657 Boulevard property just after Derek celebrated his 40th birthday, and the 3 kids were already debating which of the house's fireplaces Santa Claus would use. But as Derek kept reading the letter from his new neighbor, it took a really sinister turn. The writer asked, quote,
How did you end up here? Did 657 Boulevard call to you with its force within?
And the letter went on.
657 Boulevard has been the subject of my family for decades now, and as it approaches its 110th birthday, I have been put in charge of watching and waiting for its second coming. My grandfather watched the house in the 1920s, and my father watched in the 1960s. It is now my time. Do you know the history of the house? Do you know what lies within the walls of 657 Boulevard? Why are you here? I will find out.
It was apparent that the author's reconnaissance of the home had apparently already begun. The letter identified the Broaddus' Honda minivan as well as the workers renovating the home. They stated, quote,
I see already that you have flooded 657 Boulevard with contractors so that you can destroy the house as it was supposed to be. Tisk, tisk, tisk. Bad move. You don't want to make 657 Boulevard unhappy.
Earlier in the week, Derek and Maria had gone to the house and chatted with their new neighbors while their children, who were 5, 8, and 10 years old, ran around the backyard with several kids from the neighborhood. And the letter writer seemed to have noticed, quote,
You have children. I have seen them. So far, I think there are 3 that I have counted.
And before asking if there was more on the way, the letter stated,
Do you need to fill the house with the young blood I requested? Better for me. Was your old house too small for the growing family? Or was it agreed to bring me your children? Once I know their names, I will call to them and draw them to me.
The envelope had no return address, and the writer stated,
Who am I? There are hundreds and hundreds of cars that drive by 657 Boulevard each day. Maybe I am in one. Look at all the windows you can see from 657 Boulevard. Maybe I am in one. Look at any of the many windows in 657 Boulevard at all the people who stroll by each day. Maybe I am one.
And with that, the letter concluded with the suggestion that this message would not be the last. Quote,
Welcome, my friends, welcome. Let the party begin.
Followed by a signature typed in a cursive font.
The Watcher.
It was after 10 p.m. and Derek Broaddus was alone. He raced around the house, turning off lights so no one could see inside, then called the Westfield Police Department. An officer came to the house, read the letter, and said, What the F is this? He asked Derek if he had enemies and recommended moving a piece of construction equipment from the back porch in case the Watcher tried to toss it through a window. Derek then rushed back to his wife and kids who were living at their old home elsewhere in Westfield. That night, Derek and Maria wrote an email to John and Andrea Woods, the couple who sold them 657 Boulevard, to ask if they had any idea who the Watcher might be or why he or she had written, quote,
I asked the Woods to bring me young blood, and it looks like they listened.
Andrea Woods did reply the next morning. A few days before moving out, the Woods had also received a letter from the Watcher. They recalled that the note had been odd and made similar mention of the Watcher's family observing the house over time. But Andrea said she and her husband had never received anything like it in their 23 years in the house and had thrown the letter away without much thought. And that day, the Woods went with Maria to the police station where Detective Leonard Lugo told her not to tell anyone about the letters, including her new neighbors, most of whom she had never met, and all of whom are now suspects. The Broadduses spent the coming weeks on high alert. Derek canceled a work trip, and whenever Maria took the kids to their new house, she would yell their names if they wandered into a corner of the yard. When Derek gave a tour of the renovation to a couple on the block, he froze when the wife said, quote, it'll be nice to have some young blood in the neighborhood. The Broaddus' general contractor arrived one morning to find that a heavy sign he hammered into the front yard had been ripped out overnight. So roughly 2 weeks after the letter arrived, Maria stopped by the house to look at some paint samples and check the mail. She immediately recognized the thick black lettering on a card-shaped envelope and called the police. This time, the Watcher wrote, quote,
the workers have been busy, and I have been watching you unload carfuls of your personal belongings. The dumpster is a nice touch. Have they found what is in the walls yet? In time, they will.
This time, disturbingly, the Watcher had addressed Derek and Maria directly, misspelling their names as Mr. and Mrs. Broaddus. The Watcher boasted of having learned a lot about the family in the preceding weeks, especially about their children. The letter identified the Broaddus' 3 kids by birth order and by their nicknames, the ones Maria had been yelling.
I am pleased to know your names now, and the name of the young blood you have brought to me. You certainly say their names often.
The letter asked about one child in particular, whom the writer had seen using an easel inside an enclosed porch, and stated, quote,
is she the artist in the family?
And the letter continued, quote,
657 Boulevard is anxious for you to move in. It has been years and years since the young blood ruled the hallways of the house. Have you found all the secrets it holds yet? Will the young blood play in the basement, or are they too afraid to go down there alone? I would be very afraid if I were them. It is far away from the rest of the house. If you were upstairs, you would never hear them scream. Will they sleep in the attic, or will you all sleep on the second floor? Who has the bedrooms facing the street? I'll know as soon as you move in. It will help me know who's in which bedroom. Then I can plan better. All of the windows and doors in 657 Boulevard allow me to watch you and track you as you move through the house. Who am I? I am the Watcher, and have been in control of 657 Boulevard for the better part of 2 decades now. The Woods family turned it over to you. It was their time to move on, and kindly sold it when I asked them to. I pass by many times a day. 657 Boulevard is my job, my life, my obsession, and now you are too, Broaddus family. Welcome to the product of your greed. Greed is what brought the pass-through families to 657 Boulevard, and now it has brought you to me. Have a happy moving in day. You know I will be watching.
Derek and Maria stopped bringing their kids to the house. They were no longer sure when or if they would move in. Several weeks later, a third letter arrived. Quote,
where have you gone to? 657 Boulevard is missing you.
So to give some background, Westfield is roughly 45 minutes from New York, has a population of 30,000. Bloomberg ranked it as the 99th wealthiest city in the US, the 18th in New Jersey, and most of the pressing issues from residents was, quote, unconstitutional policing, that is, aggressive parking enforcement. As one resident put it, there's a lot of money and a lot of ego. And there's been properties where there's been bidding wars where people have lost by $300,000. So to say that it's an affluent neighborhood would be a gross misunderstatement. In 1905, 657 Boulevard was an impressive home that attracted many offers when the Woods decided to sell it. The Broadduses, of course being the new owners, believed the Watcher, the person sending them these disturbing letters, might be someone who was upset about losing the house. However, the Woods informed them that one interested buyer had withdrawn due to a medical condition and another had already purchased another home. Andrea Wood suggested in an email to the Broadduses that the mention of the contractor trucks and their children might indicate that the person behind the Watcher was from the neighborhood. It was discovered that these letters had been processed in Kearney, the U.S. Postal Service distribution center located in northern New Jersey. This information indicated that the Watcher was likely located nearby. The first letter arrived before the public announcement of the house sale, just a day after the contractors began renovating the property, and despite the renovations, neighbors claimed not to have noticed anything unusual, leaving the Broadduses perplexed as they searched for continued answers. During a neighborhood barbecue, Maria and Derek remained vigilant, scanning the crowd for clues about the Watcher while keeping an eye on their children, unaware that the postal connection and the timing of the letters had intensified the mystery surrounding their new home. Derek did speak with one neighbor, John Schmidt, who lived 2 doors down, and informed him of the Langford family, who lived between them. Peggy Langford was in her 90s, and several of her adult children, all in their 60s, lived with her. The family was a bit odd, as Schmidt said, but harmless nonetheless. This revelation of the postal connection and the Langford family added intrigue to the whole situation, fueling the Broadduses' speculation about the identity of the Watcher and any potential ties to their neighbors. The series of events surrounding the letters continued to puzzle and unsettle the family as they tried to uncover the truth behind the unsettling messages and maintain some kind of sense of security in their new home. At this point, Derek believed the mystery was solved when he discovered the Langford house positioned next to the porch easel that was mentioned in the letter. According to the letters, the Watcher's family had been observing 657 Boulevard since the 1960s, with Richard Langford, the father, starting the surveillance. However, Richard had passed away 12 years prior, and the current Watcher claimed to have taken over for nearly 2 decades. When Derek informed Detective Lugo about the Langford family, Lugo already had knowledge of them and brought Michael Langford, a member of the family, in for questioning. Although Michael denied involvement, Derek was informed that certain details from Michael's statement aligned with the content of the letters. Regardless, despite these developments, solid evidence was lacking, and after a few weeks, the police chief informed the Broaddus family that without a confession, there was limited action the department could take, and Derek, frustrated by this response, made it clear to the police that if they failed to address the situation, he would take matters into his own hands. Derek, of course, felt a strong sense of protection towards his family, and he believed that the person who threatened them deserved consequences beyond what the authorities were willing to provide. Frustrated with the lack of progress from the police, the Broaddus family took matters into their own hands and initiated their own personal investigation. Derek, in particular, became consumed by the case. He installed webcams throughout the property and spent sleepless nights in the darkness, closely monitoring the house for any signs of surveillance. Derek's intense focus on the matter made Maria question his sanity, but he remained determined to uncover the truth. Being desperate for answers, the Broaddus family sought assistance of various experts in their quest to uncover the identity of the Watcher. They hired a private investigator who conducted surveillance in the neighborhood and conducted background checks on the Langford family, but no significant findings emerged. Derek even reached out to a former FBI agent who actually served as the inspiration for a character in Silence of the Lambs. Additionally, they enlisted the help of Robert Lenahan, another former FBI agent, to perform a threat assessment. Lenahan, analyzing the letters, observed certain old-fashioned characteristics that suggested an older writer. The envelope was addressed to, quote, M/M Broaddus. The salutations referenced the weather of the day, and there were double spaces between sentences. The letters exhibited a literary flair, indicating a, quote, voracious reader, and surprisingly lacked profanity despite the evident anger, implying a writer was, quote, less macho. Lenahan speculated whether the Watcher had seen the movie, quote, The Watcher, which featured a serial killer stalking the detective pursuing him, played by Keanu Reeves. Now, while Lenahan believed that the Watcher was unlikely to act on the threats, he noted that the letters contained enough typos and errors to suggest erratic behavior. The letters also displayed a seething anger directed at the wealthy, particularly resenting the influx of new money into the town and expressing disapproval of the Broaddus' relatively modest renovations. As quoted from a letter,
"The house is crying from all of the pain it is going through. You have changed it and made it so fancy. You are stealing its history. It cries for the past and what used to be in the time when I roamed its halls. The 1960s were a good time for 657 Boulevard when I ran from room to room, imagining the life with the rich occupants there. The house was full of life and young blood. Then it got old, and so did my father, but he kept watching it until the day he died. and now I watch and wait for the day when the young blood will be mine again.
Now, despite the focus on the Langford family as potential suspects, the Broaddus family's attempts to provoke a response from them by announcing plans to tear down the house yielded no results. Detective Lugo's second interview with Michael Langford proved unfruitful, and tensions escalated when Abby Langford accused the police of harassment. Seeking legal assistance, the Broadduses hired a lawyer named Lee Levitt, who presented the letters and supporting evidence to several members of the Langford family and their attorney. However, the Langfords vehemently maintained Michael's innocence. Of course, other possible suspects came under consideration. The fact that the police had already spoken to Michael before the second letter was sent cast doubt on his involvement. Additionally, the private investigator uncovered the presence of 2 child sex offenders in close proximity to the neighborhood. Bill Woodward, the Broaddus' house painter, also observed suspicious behavior from a neighboring couple who placed their lawn chairs unusually close to the Broaddus' property and positioned themselves to face their home instead of their own. But by the end of 2014, the investigation reached a standstill. The Watcher had left no digital traces or physical evidence that could link them to the crime. The letters could be analyzed for potential clues or dismissed as the deranged ramblings of a sociopath. The complexity of the case made it akin to finding a needle in a haystack, leaving investigators and authorities with limited options. In December, the Westfield police informed the Broaddus family that they had exhausted all available leads. In a final attempt to bring a sense of peace, Derek sought the blessings of the house from his priest, hoping for some sort of spiritual protection. So post-investigation, and after completing the renovations at 657 Boulevard, including installing a new alarm system, the Broaddus family still found themselves consumed by anxiety. The prospect of moving into the house filled them with fear. They worried about their children's safety and the possibility of receiving more threatening letters. Derek even considered hiring trained German shepherds and sought assistance from military veterans to enhance security. However, they didn't want to turn their home into a fortress and isolate themselves from the world. Maria expressed their dilemma, stating that they weren't willing to put their children in harm's way. And Derek often responded to alarms at the house, even in the middle of the night, always carrying a knife for protection. The emotional toll on the family was evident, as Maria found solace in the arms of a stranger, Bill Woodward, the painter, crying and shaking with fear. The situation was further exacerbated by the increasingly unhinged nature of the Watcher's messages. The mounting distress and escalating threats made the decision to move into 657 Boulevard even more daunting for the Broaddus family. As quoted from the Watcher,
657 Boulevard is turning on me. It is coming after me. I don't understand why. What spell did you cast on it? It used to be my friend and now it is my enemy. I am in charge of 657 Boulevard. It is not in charge of me. I will fend off its bad things and wait for it to become good again. It will not punish me. I will rise again. I will be patient, wait for this to pass, and for you to bring the young blood back to me. 657 Boulevard needs young blood. It needs you. Come back. Let the young blood play again like I once did. Let the young blood sleep at 657 Boulevard. Stop changing it and let it alone.
So roughly after 6 months of enduring the Watcher's letters, the Broaddus family made the difficult decision to sell 657 Boulevard. However, the house remained vacant due to rumors circulating in the gossip suburban New Jersey real estate market. Concerned about the potential impact on buyers, the Broadduses disclosed the existence of the letters to interested parties and planned to share the full letters with serious buyers. Despite receiving preliminary offers below their asking price, they refused to compromise their ethical stance and only wanted to reveal the letters to genuine buyers. However, they failed to find a suitable buyer even after reducing the price. Reflecting on their own experience, the Broadduses contemplated whether they would have appreciated the previous owners informing them about the Watcher's letter. The Woodses, the former owners, recalled receiving a letter that seemed strange rather than threatening and had no issue during their time at the house. Nonetheless, the Broadduses believed that the ominous nature of the Watcher's name warranted disclosure to the new occupants. Consequently, they filed a legal complaint against the Woodses, asserting that they should have revealed the letter along with other property-related information. Hoping for a quiet settlement, they never anticipated the subsequent media frenzy when news outlets picked up the story. The publicity surrounding the case was absolutely overwhelming. Media trucks descended upon 657 Boulevard and the Broadduses received over 300 media requests. In an effort to protect their children from further attention, they chose not to speak publicly and temporarily left Westfield to stay at a friend's beach house. The situation remained tumultuous, with family emergencies adding to their distress. Eventually, Derek and Maria had to have a sit down with their children to explain the truth behind their unsettling ordeal. It was a challenging conversation as they grappled with explaining the presence of an obsessed individual threatening their safety. As national attention focused on the case, Detective Baron Chambliss from the Westfield Police was assigned to investigate. He did discover that DNA analysis had been conducted on one of the envelopes, revealing that the DNA belonged to a woman. Chambliss decided to scrutinize Abby Langford, Michael's sister, as a potential suspect. However, her DNA did not match the sample. The Langfords were eventually ruled out as suspects by the prosecutor's office, leaving the Broadduses puzzled and questioning the motives behind the decision. With no clear suspect, the Broadduses continued their own investigation. They discreetly showed their neighbors a picture of the Watcher's envelope, hoping for any recognition. They hired a security firm and a forensic linguist, but no significant leads emerged. The police also struggled to make progress, and a potential clue was missed when another family on the boulevard received a similar letter around the same time as the Broadduses, but discarded it. Chambliss and his partner observed the house one night and grew suspicious of a car that stopped in front of it. The car was traced to a young woman whose boyfriend lived on the same block. With media attention dwindling, Chambliss closed the case without making any arrests or finding a definitive answer to the Watcher mystery. Of course, going back to the public revelation of the Watcher letters, the story became more like a creepy urban legend for the rest of Westfield. Some neighbors even speculated that the Broadduses had sent the letters to themselves as part of an elaborate scheme to get out of the house purchase or commit insurance fraud. Locals questioned their motives, pointing out that their property upgrades and refinancing. The Westfield Leader published an article that raised doubts about the Broadduses' renovation plans and even criticized Maria's commitment to her family's safety based on her public Facebook page. Although possible, these theories essentially lacked logical sense, but the rumors persisted, and even some Westfield police officers believed in the conspiracy theory. Online skeptics accused the Broadduses of perpetuating a scam. Accustomed to being part of the community, the Broadduses were shocked to even be accused of being con artists and found it disheartening that some residents preferred the conspiracy theory over acknowledging the potential existence of a menace in their town. Now, while some locals were concerned about the impact on Westfield's reputation, the Broadduses felt like outcasts in their own town. Derek wanted to leave Westfield, but Maria insisted on staying to protect their children. They eventually bought a second home in Westfield using an LLC to maintain privacy. However, the stress of staying in the town was overwhelming, and even everyday activities like letting their children go to the pool became sources of anxiety. Their children faced the misconception that Westfield was safe despite their own experience. And despite the challenges, the Broadduses remained determined not to let the Watcher take more from them and chose to stay in Westfield, albeit with heightened caution and vigilance. And as the Broadduses dealt with the aftermath of the Watcher letters, they faced the challenge of what to do with 657 Boulevard. Their lawsuit against the Woodses seemed unlikely to succeed since New Jersey had no regulation requiring sellers to disclose potential hauntings or similar issues. They attempted to sell the house again, hoping that the publicity surrounding the Watcher might attract buyers who would disregard the letters. However, each potential buyer who read the letters backed out, leaving them without any viable options. Their real estate lawyer proposed selling the house to a developer who could tear it down and divide the property into 2 sellable homes, but this sparked controversy and heated discussions on Westfield's Facebook groups. Some sympathized with the Broadduses, while others believed it was part of a long con. The planning board meeting to decide the proposal attracted over 100 residents, and tensions ran high. Neighbors expressed concern about aesthetics and the potential for more letters being sent to the new homes. After a 4-hour hearing, the board unanimously rejected the proposal, leaving the Broadduses devastated. The financial burden continued to weigh on the Broadduses, with ongoing mortgage payments, property taxes, and the costs associated with investigating the Watcher. They had paid significant amounts of money, but their neighbors seemed more focused on the financial impact on themselves. The rejection of the proposal made the Broadduses feel like their town prioritized the house over their well-being. Despite the beauty of 657 Boulevard and their attachment to the town, they felt let down by the lack of compassion and understanding from their neighbors. In addition to these challenges, Maria's father had recently passed away, adding to their emotional burden. The human element of the story seemed lost on many neighbors who viewed it as a hoax. The Watcher's desire to protect the street from change had ironically torn the community apart. After the planning board's rejection, the Broadduses Broadduses finally found renters for 657 Boulevard, a family with grown children and 2 dogs. Although the renter claimed not to be concerned about the watcher, they included a clause in the lease that allowed them to break the agreement if another letter did arrive. 2 weeks later, Derek visited the house to address a squirrel problem and was handed an envelope by the renter. The letter, dated February 13th, was addressed to Derek and Maria and displayed a more wrathful tone than the previous letters.
Violent winds and bitter cold to the vile and spiteful Derek and his wench of a wife Maria.
The writers seem to have closely followed the story, mentioning the media coverage, Derek's investigative efforts, and the attempted demolition of the house. They claimed that their followers, quote, the soldiers of the boulevard, had carried out their orders and saved the soul of 657 Boulevard, and the letter went on.
Maybe a car accident, maybe a fire, maybe something as simple as a mild illness that never seems to go away but makes you feel sick day after day after day after day after day. Maybe the mysterious death of a pet, loved ones suddenly die, planes and cars and bicycles crash, bones break.
Now this unexpected letter brought the Broadduses back to square one, but it also provided fresh evidence that could potentially help the investigation. Derek took the letter to the police, and while there wasn't much solid evidence, a detective suggested that the watcher must be somewhere within a 300-yard radius of the house. Derek believed the suspect was even closer, possibly residing in one of the 10 neighboring houses. The Broadduses continued to pursue the case, but the lack of substantial leads made it difficult for law enforcement to make progress. Various neighbors were mentioned as potential suspects, such as a teenager whose father had connections to the area, a man who played the flute in the neighborhood, and an elderly couple who had lived behind the house for decades. However, these leads were inconclusive and could easily be dismissed. The Broadduses shared any suspicious information they came across with investigators, but their greatest fear was that the watcher could be someone that they would never suspect. So in conclusion, as of 2022, the Broadduses, although no longer living in constant fear of the watcher, continue to face the aftermath of the letters. They have a new tenant at 657 Boulevard, but the rent they receive does not cover the mortgage. Their children occasionally experience teasing at school, and the rumors and accusations from the community persist. The couple tries to avoid those who oppose their planning board application, but living in the same suburban area does make it challenging. The emotional toll is still evident, and encounters with certain individuals trigger anxiety and stress. Maria even confronted the head of the planning board at the YMCA, expressing how much her family is still affected by the situation. And while most people in Westfield have moved on from the watcher, Derek and Maria find it difficult to escape the association with the house. They contemplate whether they should have sold the property early on, even at a loss, as the emotional pain associated with 657 Boulevard is too significant for them to consider moving in. They hope that a few years of incident-free renting will make it easier for them to sell the house. The prosecutor's office continues its investigation, but the Broadduses are aware that apprehending the watcher is unlikely and any legal consequences would likely be minimal. Interestingly, it is revealed that the watcher is no longer the only anonymous letter writer in Westfield. On Christmas Eve, several families received hand-delivered envelopes from an unknown sender. These letters were sent to individuals who had been vocal in criticizing the Broadduses online. The letters, signed as, quote, friends of the Broaddus family, were poetic and accused the recipients of speculating inaccurately about the Broadduses. The anonymous letters appeared to be driven by a simmering resentment that had divided neighbors in Westfield. Derek Broaddus eventually confessed to writing these letters, feeling compelled to defend his family against baseless accusations. While he wasn't proud of his actions, he explained that the relentless accusations had pushed him to his limit. The deep impact of the watcher's letters and the subsequent events continue to haunt the Broaddus family, dominating their thoughts and daily lives. In a quote of the fourth letter, it stated,
"You are despised by the house, and the watcher won."
So thank you so much for watching this video. I know I covered a lot, and there's probably a lot of little details that I probably have missed and updates that haven't gotten to circulation with me. And I also know there's been a bit of a break in my videos, just me dealing with my own personal issues right now, but I'm really hoping to get videos back in circulation on a regular basis. So thank you for your support, and please subscribe for future content and to help grow this channel.